The story of Heracles. Chapter 1. The beginning. Zeus loved the mortals. He created them, but some of his offspring were more special than others. The hero Perseus was perhaps the greatest of them all, the slayer of the Gorgon Medusa, whom, after his death, had been raised into the heavens. As a result, the king of the gods proclaimed that the next son born of the house of Perseus would be king of all of Greece. So Zeus went down to earth to see, out of those who bore the bloodline, were most suited for the honour. Amphitryon was the grandson of Perseus. After an unfortunate business whereby the young man accidentally killed his own uncle, the king of Mycenae, Electron, King Sane being a major sin in Greece, he fled with the daughter of his uncle, Alcmene, to Thebes, where they were married. As is all too often true in Greek myth, the murder of king was an affront against the gods, but relations with them seemed to be just your average Tuesday. For the gods, who were more often or not were married to their siblings or other close relations, the idea of double dipping back into the line of Perseus was ideal if nothing else. So the king of Olympus had found his candidate. Zeus was known by many names. Zeus, king of the gods. Zeus, the Stormfather. Zeus, the Olympian. Zeus, the faithful, was not an epithet that was given to the king of heavens. A point not lost on his ever-watchful wife, Hera. To avoid the gaze of his ever more irritated wife, Zeus took to transforming himself into different people, animals, or beasts when looking to engage in his more amorous activities, which, suffice it to say, didn't just end with human women. While Zeus's affairs were numerous, it took someone, or something, of exceptional beauty to catch the eye of the All-Father. So, when Zeus came down from up high to gaze upon the beautiful Alcmene, a thought crossed his mind. What if Zeus was the father of a child with the girl, and not her husband? Surely, with the blood of Zeus and of Perseus, their mortal child would be a fine ruler. Headstrong and full of lust, Zeus's mind was set. One day, when Amphitryon was away, Zeus disguised himself as the young man and went home where Alcmene waited. And despite her initial surprise at her husband's early arrival, those feelings quickly evaporated as they went to bed. Several hours later, Zeus left and went back up to Olympus. Later that same day, the real Amphitryon returned, relieved to be back home at last. At the sight of his wife was too much for him to bear. So he took the now tired Alcmene to bed. Thus, she now became pregnant with twins, of a sort, one with her husband and the other with Zeus. Several months went by until just before the birth was due. Zeus, drunk, boasted rather stupidly that his son with Alcmene was soon to be born and rule over all of Greece. Hera, furious at her husband's infidelity, swore to make her husband pay for his latest slight on her honour. The goddess of wisdom came down from the heavens herself and delayed the birth of Zeus's child. Then flew to Sthenelus, another grandson of Perseus, and sped up the pregnancy of his wife, Nikope, so their child would be born first, and thus, by Zeus's decree, be made king. Returning to the heaven in triumph, Hera announced to the gods the joyous news of the birth of Eurystheus. Zeus was shocked, but his word was law. To go back on it would invite no end of difficulties. So, reluctantly, he agreed that little Eurystheus would rule. However bone-headed he might have been, Zeus was not stupid. Far from it, and he knew his wife all too well. Looking down at Alcmene, Zeus saw her squirming in such pain, and in the room next door to her sat, with her legs crossed, Althea, goddess of childbirth and good friend of Hera. While Althea sat with her legs crossed, Alcmene couldn't give birth. Something had to be done. Zeus sent one of Alcmene's maids into the room where the goddess sat, explaining that the babies had in fact been born, and how relieved they all were. Althea was shocked that her magic hadn't worked, and stood and walked over to check if it was true, and in doing so uncrossed her legs. The moment she did, Alcmene gave birth to 2 boys. It was true that Alcmene was beautiful, but beauty does not limit wisdom, and Alcmene was also wise. She knew what had happened to her couldn't be done by mortal means. She travelled to Tiresias, a prophet who explained all to her, the visit from Zeus and the revenge of Hera. However, looking at the babies, you couldn't tell who was the son of the god and who was by her husband. They were both so similar. Deciding to her it didn't matter, she would love them both equally, Alcmene returned home. Chapter 2. Snakes in the Grass. Hercules, you might have guessed, was strong. Very strong. Unnaturally strong. However, just by looking at the infant baby, you wouldn't have known. Yes, he was big, but the child had an extra long time in the womb, so surely it was natural for him to be a bit bigger than the average baby. Compared to his twin, it would have been hard to tell them apart. But Hera knew, and the wrath of a wronged wife isn't so easily tossed aside. Hera saw how her husband so arrogantly swooned over the boy in front of her. It drove her insane that he would flaunt the result of his affair so haughtily in front of her face. So she came to the conclusion that the baby must be dealt with. She couldn't do it herself. Her husband's wrath was legendary, and she didn't want to end up like Prometheus for his betrayal. She needed deniability, so the goddess of wisdom formulated a plan. In the middle of the night, Hera placed 2 snakes at the edge of the palace with the sole instruction to end the boy. Then, picking up and returning home before Zeus noticed that she had gone. The snakes delivered resolutely towards their target, reaching the crib where young Heracles lay, half asleep. Hissing, they rose to strike at the same time, but as they did, the baby woke. Now, most babies aren't a fan of waking up at the best of times. It's hot, and it feels funny, but to wake up with 2 huge scary serpents over you would cause most to scream like they've never done before. But not Heracles. Alas, instead, the infant smiled warmly, excited even, giving even these serpent assassins the night pause. Was this normal human behaviour? Looking at each other, the snakes attacked, launching themselves at the target, looking to coil themselves around it, squeezing until it breathed no more. Heracles, however, while only a babe, was the son of Zeus. He caught each snake in one hand, smashing their heads together before tying their limp bodies into a make sort of rope. What a fantastic toy for a baby. Waking the next morning, Alcmene went to check on her boys and nearly fainted when she saw the snakes wrapped around Heracles. For her husband, who arrived quickly out of breath. He went to grab the snakes, but noticed their tails were knotted together, and the smiling baby beneath, who was seeing his father, promptly sat up and started swinging the serpents round and round his head like a lasso. And so finally, Alcmene knew with certainty which of her children were the offspring of her dalliance with the thunder god. Knowing her child was Zeus was always going to be seen as an insult to the queen of the gods. Alcmene attempted to honour her and as such lessen her anger against the innocent child by naming it Heracles, or as the Romans and Disney know him, Hercules. Among history enthusiasts, there's a lot of back and forth about which name to use. Some argue that Heracles is his proper Greek name, and the use of Hercules is Disney using his Latin name instead of the proper Greek one. While others say that popular culture dictates us to use the Roman name Hercules, and to use the Greek name is just confusing snobbishness. Realistically, it doesn't matter which name you use. Both Heracles and Hercules are both equally valid and can be used interchangeably. Personally, I was taught Heracles, and that's what I use. To me, it just fits better with honouring Hera. But either way, it doesn't really matter. Just use whatever you like or are more comfortable with. That is the story of Heracles before his birth and his infancy. In the next video, we'll be looking at Heracles growing up, some growing pains, his education, and his first dalliances with disaster, and how that would shape him. So like and subscribe for the next one. Goodbye.